I'm here in my garden this morning where I'm about to plant some reed grasses, orange calla lilies, and yellow violas that you can see here behind me next to my garage alongside my revered Buddha head that I have been dragging around with me through California and Ohio. I had to move some large clumps of hosta in order to make space for them. And these hosta had been there for decades, just getting bigger and thicker, so thick that they were choking themselves out. And with a little tending, I was able to dig them up and break them up into smaller clumps and spread them out around the yard so they can have more impact and have more space to grow in a healthy way. You know, it reminds me of all of the stories that we've been hearing lately as humans have sequestered ourselves indoors, of nature taking over, especially animals. You know, there was a story going around about the canals of Venice and how in the absence of motorized boats, the water got so clear and there was so little traffic there that dolphins returned. There's also a story about monkeys taking over the streets of cities in Korea, in South Korea. Just walking around this man-made landscape as if they had built it themselves for their own use, like they were claiming ownership of it. You know, it's a reminder to me of how strong the earth really is, how resilient and how adaptive. And meanwhile, our whole global economy, after just a few weeks of reduced consumption, is in shambles. You know, I've always thought of the economy as being robust, since it's rooted in human relationships and assigning value to the goods and services we provide to one another. And human relationship will always exist, especially globally. When one nation is suffering, another nation is thriving. And migration is constantly going on, fueling the economy. When one group is too comfortable to be bothered with the disgusting or the mundane tasks, there's always another group that comes along, ready and willing to do the work, whether they're doing it out of desperation or fantasy of what their life could be. It can all be pretty exploitative at times. It can be oppressive, but it works in its own way. It's robust. And I've always thought the economy can't be killed. Consumerism, capitalism is such a giant, massive, all-encompassing system that nothing would ever harm it. Not really, not over the long haul. You know, some of the tales of animals reclaiming the earth are true, but some are not. Like, sadly, the tales of dolphins in Venice and monkeys in Korea. They're not true. They're wildly exaggerated. But some things are true, like the story of the wolves in the national park. You know, some people thought that it would take hundreds of years for it to change. Some people thought that it should happen instantly in order to be successful. But it takes time. And I think the thing about it all is that both the economy and the ecology, like church life, are about relationships. Relationships that have to be tended to. And if we want to tend to those relationships, we have to pay attention to the things that should be there but are absent. And to think about how every piece of those complex relationships affects every other piece of those complex relationships. The thing I find really interesting about the tale of the wolves and the river is that there's a predator that's reintroduced into the complex system. And that predator ends up changing things in ways that on the surface don't make any sense. I mean, how can a predator positively affect the growth of life? And it gets me thinking about coronavirus and how, in its own way, it's a predator, but it's forcing us all to regroup, to step back, to recognize what we really need to live with and what's superfluous, what might be exploitative. You know, this whole run on things like bleach wipes and toilet paper and the hoarding that's gone along with that has made us all realize that we all have to be mindful of the needs of other people and not just our own needs. You know, these systems, the ecology, the economy, church life, they're neither robust and resilient, nor are they completely helpless. All they take is tending to. They take attention. And that's what I hope we'll take away from this. You know, the earth serves as a reminder that we have to pay attention to problems that arise, pay attention to the ways in which the most vulnerable may not be served by our systems, especially by our patterns of consumption and commodification. It's a reminder that none of this is a commodity. It's all relationship. And my hope is that what we get out of this is that we remember that it requires our tending to.
This is Sarah Armstrong's tune. Let's tuck in. Can eat potatoes.
This Earth Day has been quite unusual. It got Rev to me and I talking about the interconnectedness of everything. And we both remembered the short video, How the Wolves Changed a River. Now this video is beautifully made and highly exaggerated. Only 14 wolves were introduced to Yellowstone in 1995, and now they average between 84 and 108. Though at one time there were over 500. Still, 14, 84, 108, or 500 of any creature except humans cannot impact an ecological environment that is of 3,471 square miles, so much so that the topographical nature of the place changes. To say that the wolves were the only factor is a myth. The drought ended, there were more bears, and so on. That is not to say that they had no impact at all. Of course they did, and do, and will. This led me to think about all the photos and videos and stories about how during this time of pandemic, when all of us humans are staying inside, the wildlife is coming out of their respective hidey holes. Now, some of these, unfortunately, are false. There are no dolphins in Venice, nor have the swans shown up for the first time in Venice. They always were there. And there are no drunk elephants in rice paddies or full-grown lions roaming down the street. That image is from a movie. Yet, there are foxes and coyotes all over the U.S. showing their shy noses. There are puma roaming neighborhoods in Santiago, Barcelona, and wild boar cruising down the road in Barcelona. There are peacocks in downtown Dubai, and deer trying to take the subway in Japan. And one of the funniest stories to me is all the mountain sheep doing yard work in Wales. Okay, eating the yards in Wales. There are reports coming from every big city about how birds have gone crazy and are louder than before. Which brings me to the most important impact everyone staying home has had. Pollution. Noise pollution, air pollution, water pollution. The birds are not going crazy, and they are not louder now than before. It's just spring, and there is no human noise. And it's this lack of human noise and all of us humans slowing down that has allowed all these other animals to remind us that they are here too, and that they've been living right next to us all along. And the air pollution seems to have dissipated overnight. Well, okay, several weeks. And the chemicals are still out there somewhere. But for the first time in, well, at least my lifetime, you can see the Himalayan mountain from over 100 miles away in Punjab, India. CO2 emissions have all but disappeared in areas of China and LA. In Delhi, Indiana, one of the most polluted places on the planet, well, the photo speaks for itself. And though there are no dolphins in Venice, and you can now, for the first time in decades, see the bottom of the river, and you can see the fish and the crabs. Venice is now talking about creating laws to prevent the water pollution from returning. Which brings me back to the river. I remember sometime, I think in the 90s, hearing a story on the radio about a river out west that was no longer being polluted by a factory. And the scientists believed it would take at least 100 years to recover. But amazingly, in just 10 years, it completely recovered its health and all the wildlife had returned. Today's research shows that most all environments will recover in 10 to 50 years, and if it was a natural disaster like a hurricane, it only takes 2 to 3 years. So on this Earth Day, maybe what we need to realize is that we just need to slow down, live simply, and get out of the way. Because like George Carlin said, this planet will be here for a long, long, long time after we're gone, and it will heal itself. It will cleanse itself, because that's what it does. It's a self-correcting system. And I wonder, if we want to continue to be part of the interconnectedness of the planet, then we need to worry about saving ourselves.
I planted these Bradford pears that are flowering behind me about 4 years ago. They were just tiny little sticks. I don't think their main trunks were any more than an inch thick, and they were only about 4 feet tall. And it's taken some nurturing, taking some paying attention to them to get them to grow into these really magnificent trees. And interspersed in between them, there are also some crab apples that aren't blooming yet, but they will be soon. They're going to erupt into a riot of pink and red, and I can't wait to see that. There's a kind of reverence I have for these trees. They're really magnificent. They remind me of our covenant that I love, that's so well illustrated in these little drawings on our t-shirts. Our covenant to love, revere, discover, and connect. Now, I know that right now, with the economy as fragile as it is, and people being laid off and watching their savings and investments drop, it's a lot to ask. There's a lot of uncertainty. But in order for our congregation, for East Shore Unitarian Universalist Church, to continue to thrive and to be a place of solace and even safety in this world where we're so struggling to find connection all the time, we need to take care of it. So that's why I want to ask you this morning to take the time to send a check into the office to fulfill your pledge from last year. And if you haven't done so yet, I also want to remind you to send in your pledge card for the next fiscal year, so that the Finance Committee and the Board of Trustees can set the budget for next year. We're facing some challenging times, and we need your support financially if we're going to survive. And this is also the month where we would be sharing our plate, our loose offering, with the Northeast Ohio, I want to make sure that I get this right, with the Northeast Ohio Music Heritage Association, NEOMA. And if you get a chance, please visit their website and push the Donate Now button and give to them. Every little bit helps.
I am open and I am willing, for to be hopeless would seem so strange. It dishonors those who go before us, so lift me up to the light of change. There is a hurting in my family, and there is sorrow in my town. There is a panic all across the nation, and there is wailing it dishonors those who go before us. So lift me up to the light of change.
Like Maggie's dogs, I feel all tuckered out after that work in the garden. But I wanted to end today's service with the last stanza of a poem by William Wordsworth. Oft, when on my couch I lie, in vacant and pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. May we each, in the coming days, try to relish the solitude and get out and enjoy the daffodils. So now I'd like to end the way that we always end when we gather, with our bond of union. We join hands in Unitarian Universalist fellowship, pledging ourselves to an individual religious freedom which transcends all creeds, not to think alike, but to journey together.